Lee and Bill filling in. Michelle is away. Update on Michelle, she's doing well. She did almost fall in a volcano yesterday, but that's okay. I knew Michelle was an adventurer when we got married and we went to the Grand Canyon on our honeymoon, and she stepped over the fence that says to stay behind this fence and walked to the very edge of the canyon, and it was probably a 400-foot drop easily. She was standing there like, who did I just marry? A little terrifying. So, no, I joked they visited the volcano yesterday that you can actually see from Casa Batel, which is the house where we all stayed at, and so we have the 360 app. Are you guys familiar with the 360 app? It kind of keeps tabs on where your family is, and so I've been watching where Michelle is while she's down there, spying on her, and that's what I do with my kids. I don't spy on her necessarily, but I took a picture yesterday and sent it to our family group chat, and the 360 app puts her like on the edge of the volcano. I'm like, so don't fall in. But it's been a good trip. She was able to bless the cosmetology graduates, and she gave a little speech and encouraged them and spent time with them, and that's what she went down for. So yeah, it's been a great time. And she comes home tomorrow, flies home tomorrow. She'll be home around midnight, and so just pray for her safety as she travels home. We're in Genesis chapter 30, if you want to turn in your Bibles there or pull up on your app, Genesis chapter 30. We do read from the New King James. I do from, as we teach. You're welcome to view or whatever Bible you have. I always say the best Bible is the one that you'll read. And so, whatever Bible that is, feel free to bring along. It may just sound a little different, but I read from the New King James. So, I think that's all I have as far as announcements go. Just to refresh where we were in the story of redemption, we made it through Abraham onto his son Isaac, which was really just a glimpse of Isaac's life, and now focusing again on Jacob before we head toward Joseph. And Jacob has been the heel catcher that his name means. He has been the conniver and the one that's always working the deal, always working the angle, and God is slowly getting a hold of his life. He ended up having to go to Paddan Aram to escape his brother who wanted to kill him. He ends up spending 20 years there, and Jacob marries, thought Rachel, but no, it wasn't Rachel. Jacob married Leah first, and then the morning after was like, what is this? What kind of trickery is this? And the trickster had been tricked. And then he marries Rachel, and then he marries Zilpah, and then he marries Bilhah, and he leaves Paddan Aram with 4 wives and 11 children thus far in the story. So 11 of the 12 tribes of Israel have been born. Benjamin is will be Rachel's contribution at the end. She actually, that's the 12th child to bring about the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph is number 11, and now that number 11 is born, Rachel has had a son. Jacob feels it's time to move on from his uncle Laban and to head back to where he started. Over the course of time, 20 years have transpired, have taken place. So we're picking it up in verse 25. If you saw my post, you'll note that I had 22 pages of note. I do believe that is a record. And so we've got a lot of ground to cover. It's a lot of reading. We're going to go through 2.5 chapters today. But I was glad worship ended early, so I've got extra time. So. All right, verse 25. And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, send me away, that I might go to my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served you, and let me go. For you know my service which I have done for you. Recall the dowry that was paid for Rachel and for Leah was 14 years of service in Laban's camp, taking care and tending to the sheep. By the end of the story today, 20 years will have passed. It's 20 years that Jacob's been away from dad and mom, who unfortunately passed away while he was gone. And Esau, his brother, it's 20 years that he's been away from his family, and he's ready to head home. So he says, let me go. And Laban said to him, please stay, if I found favor in your eyes, for I've learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. And then he said, name your wages, and I will give it. Now, imagine you go in tomorrow morning and you speak with your boss and you say, you know, I've done well for this company and I've enjoyed my time here, but it's time for me to move on. It's time for me to do something else. And your boss says, no, we know that you've been blessed. You know, our company's been blessed because you're here. We can't let you go. Name your price, right? No company today is ever going to do that, I don't think. Maybe perhaps they will. But we need to understand the spiritual aspect of what's happening here, because maybe we'll run into a similar situation in our own lives. The Lord is drawing Jacob home. The Lord is drawing Jacob to a new venture in faith, to something new, at least in Laban's eyes. What's going to happen is, because of this offer, Jacob's actually going to tarry. Even though the Lord is drawing him home, Jacob's like, well, name your paycheck. I think I can hang around for a little bit longer. Don't be surprised if when you commit yourself to the plan of God that He is leading you in, don't be surprised when the world comes with a better offer. Right? Don't be surprised if the world would come and say, well, shiny new car if you stay. Or new benefits, or we'll pay for your health insurance. Could you imagine? $900 a month for our health insurance, you know? Don't be surprised if the world would come along with what seems like a quote-unquote better offer. Name your price is what Laban offers here. I don't know if you remember me saying this, but seems to be a reoccurring theme as we go through the book of Genesis. This is now the third time I've said this. Famine with God is better than feasting with the world. Famine with God is better than feasting with the world. It is far better for us to follow after God's plan, even if it means famine, instead of what looks like the better offer. Jacob doesn't quite get that yet, so Jacob says in verse 29, you know how I have served you and how your livestock has been with me. For what you have had before I came was little, and it has increased to a great amount. The Lord has blessed you since my coming. And now, when shall I also provide for my own house? Jacob does recognize who's doing the blessing. Capital H on the who there. God is doing the blessing. The Lord is taking care of him. The Lord is blessing Laban because of him. We see Jacob saying the right things here. And we've talked about how Jacob had a relationship with the Lord already. He built the altar there in Bethel. He prayed. He made a vow. But through these 20 years under Laban's care, and we talked about this last week, he is being sanctified. You guys remember what sanctified means?
Set aside.
Set aside, to be made holy, to be pure unto God and devoted to Him. And God is working on Jacob. It's taking a long time to pull all the dross out of his life because of what a deceiver and deceptor he was. Is that the right word? Deceptor? Deceiver? Conniver? Healed? Trickster? You get the idea. He's being sanctified. So verse 31 says, so he said, what shall I give you? Laban's like, the offer's on the table. And Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. I will do this thing for me. I will feed and keep your flocks. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from there all the speckled and spotted sheep, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and these shall be my wages. So my righteousness will answer for me in times to come. When the subject of my wages comes before you, everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the lambs will be considered stolen if it is with me. And Laban said, oh, that it were according to your word. Laban's looking at this deal going, yeah, this is really a good deal for my benefit. And it is a little confusing. I'll try to sort it out here in a second. Jacob is saying the right things. I'm going to put my trust in God. I don't want anything from you. He doesn't want anything from Laban. So verse 35 says, so he removed That day, the male goats that were speckled and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, everyone that had some white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and gave them into the hands of his sons. And so what's happening here is, the plan is, Jacob is going to tend to Laban's animals. The reason Laban is so quick to agree is because Jacob has stacked the deal against himself. It's a better deal for Laban. The odds are in Laban's favor. Jacob removes all of the speckled and spotted animals and gives them to Laban's sons. So what Jacob has left are solid colored animals. Are you tracking? The sheep are white, the goats are black. That's it. So the odds of the solid colored animals mating should produce solid colored offspring. The deal was, if the offspring were speckled and spotted, they would belong to Jacob. That's the plan. So I've got solid, solid sheep and goats, and if they produce speckled, those are mine. The odds are stacked against Jacob, and that's why Laban's like, "Yep, sounds good to me. Let's do it." Says verse 36, then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob, Laban did, he removed all the speckled and spotted animals, spotted animals, and he removed them all, so Jacob has just solid animals now, solid colored. He put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock. Now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar, and of the almond and chestnut trees, peeled white strips in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And the rods which he had peeled, he set before the flocks in the gutters where they drink, in the watering troughs where the flocks come to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the streaked and all of the brown in the flock of Laban, but he put his own flocks by themselves and did not put them with Laban's flock. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were feeble, easy to say, he did not put them in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger were Jacob's. Makes perfect sense, right? I've read this 100 times, and I'm just like, Jacob, you're just doing witchcraft here, aren't you? Right? This is just, why would peeling trees make a difference on what was produced out of an animal? Is it an aphrodisiac for the sheep? Is it what's going on here? It makes absolutely no sense. No sense. That makes no sense. I don't know where that came from. Whatever.
Your inner soul.
Yes, I guess. Evidently I have Paula Deen. Makes no sense. You guys know how to make a Paula Deen salad? You take a little bit of lettuce, and then, Lily, you do it.
No.
Okay. You take a little bit of lettuce, and you throw in some butter, and you throw in some bacon, and you throw in some blue cheese, and then you throw that leafy crap out, and you got a salad. Anyway, sorry. So I don't understand how this works. And it's possible that Jacob knows more about animal husbandry than we do today. It's possible that God had given him a sign to say, this is what you shall do. Or it's possible that Jacob was doing the best he could do and God was blessing him. I like that answer. Jacob's just like, well, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to trust the Lord. And that's kind of what it seems like to me. Maybe Jacob's taking another step in faith here to say, yeah, this is how I'm going to trust that God is going to bless me. Well, look what happens. Verse 43, thus the man became exceedingly prosperous and had large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what our fathers he has acquired all this wealth. And from what was our father's, he has acquired all this wealth. Laban's sons are like, yeah, look at Jacob. Envy is such a wicked thing. It's such an evil thing. Jacob hadn't taken anything of Laban's. In fact, Laban had prospered through this venture as well. God was blessing Laban and he had much. Both herds were growing. They had both grown in wealth. It's just that Jacob's wealth had grown more. Keeping up with the Joneses is such a vain pursuit. And that's what's happening to Laban's sons, and unfortunately, envy is like a poison. It kind of saturates everything around them. Verse 2 of 31 says, "And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him." Like I said, envy is a poison that can seep into others as well. And so he hears his sons complaining about Jacob, and Laban's like, yeah, I really don't like Jacob. And then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you." Jacob was ready to leave. He said at the beginning of our reading today, "It's time for me to go." But then this offer came of a blank paycheck, and he delayed. And now the Lord is speaking directly to him. So Jacob was ready, pause, readjust, and now the Lord is speaking directly to him. Hey, Jacob, it's time to go. Watch the way Jacob acts despite the promise of watch the way Jacob acts in spite of what God has promised. Remember, God said, "I will be with you." Watch the way Jacob acts. So verse 4, "So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field to his flock and said to them, I see that your father's countenance, that it is not favorable toward me as it was before, but the God of my father has been with me." So he calls Leah and Rachel out to the field. That's like a secret meeting, right? There's nobody around to make sure that they're listening to relay messages back to Laban. Secret meeting out in the field so as not to be overheard. And he says, "And you know that with all my might I've served your father, yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not allow him to hurt me." And you hear in Jacob now another step perhaps. God has taken care of me. God has provided help for me. He is my protector. He is my shield. That was my prayer this morning, that He is our strong tower. He is our defense. It reminded me of Psalm 31. Oh, wrong way. Come on. It worked. We practiced earlier.
I was confused.
Okay. There. Psalm 121, a song of ascent. "I will lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help?" Or where does my help come from? "My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep." Jacob is recognizing this. That's a little play on words, at least for today, for us. He who keeps Israel. Right? Jacob is going to become Israel. In fact, we'll read that today. He's taking care of Israel. He never sleeps. God never sleeps. He is always the one who takes care of us. So verse 8 says, Jacob's still talking about Laban. "If he said thus, the speckled and spotted shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. And if he said thus, the streaked shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and has given them to me. And it happened at the time when the flocks conceived that I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here I am. And that's the right response. If you hear God say your name, the right answer is, Here I am. That's what Isaiah said in chapter 6. Here I am, send me. God is less interested in our ability and more interested in our availability. That we would be willing to serve Him. And so this is God responding in verse 12. And He said, Lift your eyes now and see all the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar, and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. Bethel. I'm the God of Bethel, Remember the word Bethel, the house of God, Bethel. And I wonder, Jacob is being drawn back home. I wonder what the flood of thoughts and emotions that came to Jacob was in his mind when God said, I am the God of Bethel. 20 years worth of memories. Reaching back 20 years before this time and say, I remember that vow. I remember that place where I met with God. We saw it in Abraham. We see it here with Jacob. We'll see it with the nation of Israel in the wilderness. Sometimes the journey of 40 days takes 40 years. It should have only taken them 40 days to cross the wilderness into the promised land when the Israelites came out of Egypt. It ended up taking 40 years. Sometimes playing the deceiver or the heel catcher can delay things for 20 years. That's what's happened to Jacob. And God is now calling him back. Our God is patient. Hear that, child of God. Our God is long-suffering. How good it is that our God, despite all of our wanderings, He's ever faithful and gently brings us back to His plan as He's got a direction for us in our lives, and we tend to walk, astray from that. He waits until we come back to that plan. I love the line in "Come Thou Fount," one of my favorite hymns, where the writer says, "I'm prone to wander. Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love." And his reply to that is, "Here's my heart, Lord. Take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above." I know I'm prone to wander, and Jacob is prone to wander in this moment, yet our God is patient, our God is long-suffering, and He woos us back to Him. He draws us back to the plan that He had for our lives. So they're out in the field, and verse 14 says, "Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, 'Is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and has also completely consumed our money.'" So the wife's response was, "Yeah, we were bought at a price." I wonder how that made Jacob feel. It's not, "We love you, Jacob. Oh, Jakey, take us wherever you want us to go." Yeah, we got sold. Dad sold us. Wow. But they do say they're more attached to Jacob than to Dad. Whatever you want us to do, whatever you want to do, Jacob. They're surrendered to the plan. Verse 16, "For all the riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it." Wives, are you in support of your God's leading over your husband? Whatever you say, whatever you think God is leading us in, and I'm so grateful for Michelle and all the years that I have had half-cocked plans that I've said, "All right, Lord, is this what you want from me?" We'll take a venture of faith. And we take a step, and we take two, and then it falls apart, and we have to pick up the pieces again. And she's like, "It's all right, we're trying to follow the Lord. Keep going, keep pressing on," and she has always been an encouragement to me in that. So he gets his wife's blessings, at least 2 of the 4. It says, "Then Jacob rose and set his sons and his wives on camels." Now think about that for a second. 4 wives, 11 children, at least. Well, no, 12, because we know of Dinah. That's a lot of camels. And camels, we've already discussed, weren't that popular back then, or weren't as fluent as, or around as much as it is today. So that's a lot of camels. Jacob is kind of showing that each one had their own camel. That's a lot of wealth. Jacob rose and set his sons and wives on camels. There's an element, and we'll see it here as we continue to read, but there's an element of immediacy here. They meet in the field, and it almost sounds like, "All right, go up, pack your stuff, let's go." This wasn't like 6 months of planning, "All right, we'll pack up the bags, it's time to go." It's like, no, this is time to go now. Perhaps even in the middle of the night, they're sneaking off here. At least we can say there are no goodbye hugs to Laban. There's no, "Hey Laban, we're leaving, see you later." This shows that Jacob does not have complete faith that God is going to take care of him, right? The promise was, I'll take care of you. And Jacob's like, let me help you take care of me. This is what we'll do. We'll sneak off in the middle of the night. He would rather rely on his old ways here. It's time to be sneaky. And he carried away all his livestock and all his possessions, which he had gained, his acquired livestock, which he had gained in Paddan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now, Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household gods that were her father's. Here's a hint, people. If your gods can be stolen, you're not serving the right God. If your gods can be stolen, you're not worshiping the right God. And we might chuckle at that. But if our house was broken into, how upset would you be? Are you worshiping material things? How many of us do? And Jacob stole away unknown to Laban the Syrian, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. Hey, Laban, I'm out. So he fled with all that he had. He arose and crossed the river and headed toward the mountains of Gilead. And Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled, right? There were no security cameras. Laban wasn't sitting in his man cave with all his security cameras up there going, oh, Jacob's leaving. It wasn't around. He's planning on setting a distance between the two parties. He's planning on spacing. Jacob's trying to get ahead of him. Then he took his brethren with him, Laban, and pursued them for 7 days' journey, and he overtook them in the mountains of Gilead. Now that may not sound like a lot to you, but that's actually pretty impressive. That shows that Jacob wasn't letting any moss grow under his feet. Him, his 4 wives, his 12 kids, the sheep, the goats, the donkeys, and camels, everybody was moving at a pretty good pace. In 10 days, there were 3 days that Laban didn't know about it, and then he catches up 7 days later to Jacob. So in 10 days, Jacob had moved nearly 300 miles. That's a pretty good clip for a large crowd. That's almost 30 miles a day. That's a pretty good clip, to move this entire entourage. So as Laban is getting closer, God is going to step in. Verse 24, but God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said to him, be careful what you speak to Jacob, neither good nor bad. Pause a second here. Why would God come to Laban and say, be careful? Only that he was intending harm, right? Laban's like, when I catch up with that boy, I'm going to wring his neck. So God wouldn't have had to intervene unless Laban's intent was death here, essentially. God is protecting Jacob. He is our banner. He covers us. He is our shield. So he has the dream, and then verse 25 says, Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountains of Gilead. So there's the 2 camps. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done, that you've stolen away unknown to me, and carried my daughters like captives taken with the sword? Notice Laban's on the offensive here. What are you doing, Jacob? You stole these things from me. Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrel and harp. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. You have done this foolish. Now you have done foolishly in so doing. Jacob, I was going to throw you a big party, a going away feast, and I would have been able to kiss my daughters and my grandsons, and yeah, right. If that were the case, God would have had to intervene. We know what Laban's heart is by deduction here. If Jacob had told Laban he was leaving, he would have killed him. No doubt in my mind about that. Look at verse 29. Laban's still speaking. It is in my power to do you harm. I could kill you, boy. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. And now when you have surely gone, because you greatly long for your father's house, but why did you steal my gods? Here's a hint. If you can lose your gods, you're not serving the right God. Then Jacob answered and said to Laban, well, because I was afraid, and rightfully so, because Laban would have killed him. For I said, perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force. Perhaps you kill me, and Rachel and Leah end up back in Laban's household. Without whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. So now Jacob's getting a little upset and saying, your gods were stolen. If you find them, then don't let him live. In the presence of our brethren, in the presence of both camps, identify what I have of yours and take it with you. For Jacob didn't know that Rachel had stolen them. So now Laban on the offense, Jacob takes the defensive position, and that's understandable. I mean, these accusations are coming. He didn't fully understand the whole circumstance. It's understandable that Jacob would be on the defense. But it's not always the best thing to be on the defense. What we need to learn in this, and what we need to learn through our own experiences, is that God is our defender. That He is our protector. He is our shield. And I would encourage you to allow Him to defend you, because He can do a way better job than you. We met with Bill Goodrich years ago as we were considering starting Church860. Bill is the pastor of Horizon, Indianapolis, and at the time was kind of one of the overseers of this region of all the Calvary chapels. And Michelle and I met with him, and I said, give me advice. And he listed off and prattled off a whole list of little sayings that were just nuggets. And the one I probably remember the most, and the one that stuck out to me the most, is he said, if you want to defend yourself, God will let you. If you want to defend yourself, God will let you. Or you can let Him defend you. That's what Jacob probably should have done in this instance. God said, I'll take care of you. But he's still learning that. And we do too. We need to learn that as well. So, he's like, if you find the gods, kill the person who has them, not knowing that it was the one whom he loved so dearly, Rachel, that actually had them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the two maids' tents, but he did not find the gods. He didn't find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. And you hear the music coming in, dun, 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 right? I envision like the 50s detective show where they're like, toss the house, and they all rush in and, they're throwing everything everywhere. I'm like, how is that finding anything? You're making a bigger mess. But, they upset the whole dresser, dump out all the drawers, so everything's a mess on the floor. Like, that helped or whatever. But that's what I envision as they go into the tent. Here's a hint. Oh, we haven't read that yet. 34. Now Rachel had taken the household idols and then put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent. We understand the idols, these are little figurines that they would bow, and they were representations of the gods that they worshiped. And so Rachel hides them in the saddle. Laban searched all about the tent, but he did not find them. Hint number 3. If you can sit on your gods, you're not worshiping the right one. And he said to her father, let it not displease my Lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is upon me. Right? It was the monthly time. And he searched, and she's like, and I killed the camel because he ticked me off, so don't make me stand up. And she searched, but did not find, or he searched and did not find the household idols. Ah, Rachel. Rachel. She learned from her dad. She learned from her husband. She too is a deceiver. And I hope she's being sanctified through this process as well. So Laban doesn't find him. Verse 36, then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that you've so hotly pursued me? And you can almost hear, the blood boiling. You can see his face, Jacob's face getting red, and the steam starting to come out of his ears, right? 20 years of pent-up anger is about to spew out of Jacob's mouth, and he's about to unleash on Laban. Although you searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us. What'd you find, Laban? These 20 years I've been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young. I've not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beasts, I didn't bring to you. I bore the loss of it. You required from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was. In the day, drought consumed me, and frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Laban, nah! Thus I've been in your house 20 years. I've served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock. Okay, 6 years for animals, 7 years for a wife. Okay. And you have changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. You would have taken it all. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night, Laban. Jacob's anger is understandable. 20 years under those circumstances, any of us would react that way. But is it best? Is Jacob honoring God in this? Not in my eyes. This is Jacob still acting in the flesh. And it happens to you and I as well. No matter how many years we've followed God, there are still times our old man rears his ugly head and we act in a manner that isn't honoring to God. It's a testament to the fact that we are in an ongoing process known as sanctification. And though we fall, we get up and we press on. There's grace, and our God is patient and long-suffering. So Jacob, probably not the best reaction, but I certainly understand. So the reply, verse 43, and Laban answered and said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. Well, what can I do to these my daughters or to their children whom you have borne? Now therefore come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Laban is now understanding or acquiescing and realizing that God is blessing Jacob, and there's nothing that Laban can do to get the upper hand in this situation. So he is offering now, let's make a covenant. Remember, the word covenant is like super hyper contract. It's only breakable by death. A contract only breakable by death. That's the idea. Let's make a covenant between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Then Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there on the heap. And they called, Laban called it something, Jagar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galid. I like Galid better because it's easier. And Laban said, this heap, same thing, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore, its name was called Galid. Also Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. So that word Jagar Sahadutha or Galid, that means a heap of witness. The stones were like, this is a witness between my camp and your camp. He says, may the Lord watch between you and me while we're absent from one another. That's the Mizpah. And maybe you've heard that term before. I think there's a coin that's like broken in half like a diamond, or a jagged edge, where you can break it in half and put it on 2 different necklaces. And they call it the Mizpah coin. And they say it's, may the Lord watch over us between you and I. And that's cute, but that's not what Laban and Jacob are saying here. It's like, may the Lord watch over you and I, because if you screw up, I want the Lord to kill you. The rocks, the heaps there would be, the idea would be, Laban, you stay on your side. Jacob, you stay on your side. And Laban, if you cross over this heap onto my side, I'll kill you. That's the covenant they're making. He says in verse 50, if you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob, here is the heap, and here is the pillar, which I have placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass from beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. So Laban's leaving the door open. You're not going to come over here and harm me. I'm not going to come over there and harm you. We will keep it open. You can come over if there's a family reunion. and you're bringing potato salad, then okay, you can come by the heap, you know. As long as you bring the good potato salad, right? That's always the question with family reunions. Who's bringing? Maybe it's just... The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judged between us, and Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. And if you go back and read a little bit, and I'm not going to draw us back right now, where you just read what it says here, what we don't see is Jacob claiming Jehovah as his God. He says the God of my father Abraham, the fear of Isaac, but we don't see Jacob actually claiming God as his in this interaction. It's coming. It's coming. We'll read it today. But he's not there yet. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his brethren to eat bread. And they ate bread and stayed all night on the mountains. And early in the morning Laban arose and kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them. And then Laban departed and returned to his place. And so we see the sun setting on one of Jacob's problems here. Laban is going away, only to see it rise on another problem. Esau is coming back into the picture. So 32 verse 1. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim, the God of two camps is the idea. Not fully sure what it means when he says he saw the angels here. However, what we can draw from this is that after leaving the man of the world, Laban, Jacob is more sensitive to the spiritual. He's seeing the angels that are protecting him now. So then Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. Watch this amazing plan that Jacob derives to strive for peace with Esau. It's like, this is well thought out, and the things that are going to happen in the next few paragraphs is like, Jacob, you had a good plan here. But all he had to do was trust God. God said, I'll be with you. He didn't have to deceive or strive put this plan together. What plans could you and I let go of if we would just simply trust that same promise? We talked last week, God makes that same promise to you and I. Jesus said in the Great Commission, "Lo, I'm with you always to the very end of the age." I'm with you. What arrangements are we working on in our mind that we could just let go of if we just would simply trust in God? Jacob needs to learn that as well. And he commanded them, saying, "Speak thus to my lord Esau." So he's sending people in front of him. "Thus your servant Jacob says, I've dwelt with Laban and stayed there until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, males and female servants. I've sent to tell my lord that I might find favor in your sight." Then the messengers returned, saying to Jacob, "We came to see your brother Esau, and he's coming to meet you. 400 guys. Jacob's like, "Go tell him, I've got all these things, I'm coming to meet you." They go and tell him, and he come back, and the messengers, "Jacob, what'd they say? What did Esau say?" And they're like, "Well, Jacob, so he's coming." And he's got 400 guys with him. That would create some anxiety. You know, you left things in bad terms back 20 years ago. Is Esau coming to kill him? Look at verse 7. "So Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, as I would be. And he divided the people that were with him and the flocks and the herds and camels into two companies." And his thinking is that Esau can't possibly get both parties. If we break everybody in half, split everybody in half, he's got to attack one or the other. He's not going to get them both. It says it in verse 8. "And he said, if Esau comes to one company and attacks it, then the other company which is left will escape. Then Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you. I'm not worthy of the least of all these mercies, and of all the truth which you've shown your servant. For I crossed over the Jordan with my staff." And that staff is going to play a part in his life from now on. "And now I've become two companies." His prayer, "Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." And this is beautiful. In Jacob's sanctification process, we see this humble prayer. Lord, help. Lord, help me. Sadly, it takes the threat of his brother with 400 guys to bring him to this point. What will it take for you to be humble? What will it take for me to be humble? And then finally, Jacob is saying, you've watched over me, God. You've taken care of me. So he lodged there at the same night, and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau his brother, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 foals. This is the gift that Jacob is giving to Esau. If you add up the animals, I think it's 580. That's a pretty significant gift that Jacob is trying to make peace with. Again, showing how much God had provided for him through Laban, and now Jacob is trying to show Esau, I want to make peace, and I'm giving you this huge gift. What, 10% of his flock? I mean, we don't know what the percentage was, but that's 580 animals that he's giving over to his brother. Then he delivered them to the hand of the servants. Every drove by itself, and said to his servants, pass over before me, and put some distance between successive droves. And he commanded the first one, saying, when Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong, and where are you going? Whose are these in front of you? Then you shall say, they are your servants, Jacob's. And it is a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he also is behind us. So he commanded the second and the third, and all who followed the drove, saying, in this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him. I think he's hoping to wear him down, so he sends the sheep first, and then the female sheep with one guy. Hey, Esau, this is Jacob's, this is a gift for you, he's coming. And then the second one, hey, Esau, this is Jacob's, it's a gift for you, and he's coming. And the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the 580 animals later, trying to wear him down. Jacob also tells them, and also say, behold, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he won't kill me. That's not what it says, but it says, perhaps he will accept me. But Jacob's thinking is, perhaps I don't die this day. So the present went on over before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp. And he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok. And that's significant. We need to understand what Jabbok means because of what's coming in Jacob's life. So understand what's happening. He sends out this huge gift, and then he sends all of the animals over the ford. And then at last, as night is set, or as the sun is setting, he's sending over his wives, everybody. And essentially, no, not essentially, in fact, Jacob is alone in this moment. He had this huge entourage with him. And now they are all on the other side of the ford, and he is on the other side. And he's there by himself. The name Jabbok means the place of emptying. The place of emptying. And this is so good. It took him 20 years to get to this point. The conniver, the deceiver, the heel catcher, the supplanter is now at a place of being empty before God. It isn't until we're empty that God can fill us up. It isn't until we're empty, a place of being empty, that God can fill us up. Watch what happens. Verse 23, he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over what he had. So Jacob has released everything that he's had. Now everything is gone. It says, verse 24, Jacob was left alone. Finally, God can deal with him. Sometimes it takes getting alone, eliminating all the noises of life. We had the pleasure last Sunday of the leadership of our church leaving for a few days just to hole up in a cottage up in northern Ohio for about 48 hours, and we spent the time praying. Just shutting out the outside world and just praying. We prayed for each other. We prayed for everybody in the church by name. We prayed for these things that we're starting on Sunday night, the Sundays at 6 events, and we prayed for our global outreach. And it was a fantastic time, but sometimes it takes getting alone. That's how Jacob is now. Imagine how he felt. I mean, Jacob's in the wilderness by himself. I don't know, but if you realize this, but there are no streetlights in the wilderness, especially at this time. It's dark. Maybe he had a little bit of firelight. He's there by himself. Every breeze brings a chill. You know, the hair on the back of his neck standing up. A branch breaks. Is that Esau? What was going through his mind in this moment? What trepidation did he have as he sat there by himself? And look what happens. And a man, notice the capital M, significant, a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now, chances are, if you know the name Jacob, this is probably a story you're familiar with, Jacob wrestling with God. But imagine Jacob's fear in that moment as this man suddenly comes up and attacks him. Did he think it was Esau at first? You know, is he feeling his hands? Oh no, they're not hairy. Okay. It's not Esau. What's going on here? We understand this man, capital M, to be God. As that's what Jacob says at the end. I've seen God face to face. That's what he says. And so we understand this man. It is a pre-incarnate Christ. It is a manifestation of God in the flesh prior to his coming in Jesus' birth. And this man is wrestling with God. Note also, it says the man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. The man is the initiator. God is the initiator in this wrestling match. It is not Jacob wrestling with man. It is man wrestling with Jacob. God is the initiator here. God is wrestling with Jacob, not simply for the physical result, but for the much greater spiritual result. We know that the man is going to put Jacob's hip out, and he'll walk all his days with a limp. And that's the physical result, but the spiritual result is far greater. All night, wrestling with this man. It says until the breaking of day. Have you been there? Have you wrestled with God through a night? Jacob's pretty stubborn. God's more stubborn. We're pretty stubborn, but God always wins. So light is coming on now. They've wrestled all night. Verse 25 says, and now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, when God saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched the socket of his hip. The socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint, and he wrestled with him. Did you guys see the picture that floated around Facebook? What happens when you put your feet on the dash of a car? Yeah. Right? So think the same thing for Jacob here. It showed the broken femur popped out of the hip, basically. Don't put your feet on the dash of the car. Anyway, so they wrestle all night. Finally, as the light is coming, the dawn is coming, God touches Jacob's hip and puts it out of socket. So Jacob's putting up a fight for sure. That's pretty impressive. It says the man did not prevail. He wrestled with God all night long. Jacob is pretty darn stubborn. But we need to understand the reason they wrestled all night is because God wanted to. Because at any moment he could have touched his hip and put out his hip and the match would have been over. Because at any moment God could have conquered. You've done this with your kids, right? You know, as they grab onto your leg, Dad, don't let go, don't let go. And you're like, oh, what am I going to do? Oh no, what am I going to, you know, you could just, it's gone, right? You know, it's not a problem. You know, just get out of here, kid. That's not the issue, but that's kind of what God's doing with Jacob here. You're cute, Jacob. What's the physical result? The result, he gets his hip put out. And I think perhaps, just something to consider, that Jacob thought, well, if all these gifts going before me don't work, and if my family doesn't slow him down, maybe I can still run away. If my gifts don't work with Esau and he still comes after me, I got a chance of still running. And God's like, no, you don't. God has a way of bringing us face to face with our fears, only to realize that most often our fears are paper giants. and that he always wins, and that he is always with us. And he said, God said, verse 26, sorry, I know I'm going long, but a little bit more. And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. God said, let me go. But he said, Jacob, I will not let you go unless you bless me. It sounds like Jacob's actually winning in this moment. No, I'm going to hold on until you bless me. And God's like, no, let me go. You know, oh yeah, I already said that. That's like when our kids are hanging on it. So Hosea gives us another perspective on what was happening with Jacob. Hosea chapter 12. He took his brother by the heel in the womb. So we know we're talking about Jacob here, right? Okay. And in his strength, he struggled with God. This situation, this scenario. Yes, he struggled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought favor from him. He found him in Bethel, and there he spoke to us. That is the Lord, the God of his hosts. The Lord is his memorable name, and I like that title. His name is memorable. But so there's no question, Hosea is talking about Jacob in this moment, and he tells us he wept and sought favor with him. This wasn't Jacob having the upper hand. This was Jacob being emptied and saying, God, I need your blessing. God, I need you. I'm not letting you go until you bless me. With tears, Jacob is seeking favor from God. So God said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. 20 years ago, he was asked the same question. And his answer at that time was Esau. My name's Esau. When his dad asked him, what's your name? And now that he's empty, now he's at the point of breaking and he's seeking God's favor, you see the surrender. I'm Jacob. I'm the deceiver. I'm the heel catcher. I'm the supplanter. And God said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel. For you've struggled with God and with men, and have prevailed. God recognizes the genuineness of Jacob's heart in this moment. And as with Abraham getting a name change, Jacob too goes through a name change. You were Jacob. You were the heel catcher. But now you're Israel, which means governed by God. You are governed by God. In the events of this night, Jacob, there in the place of Jabbok, the place of the emptying, he humbles himself before God. It's no longer about himself. He is now governed by God. And from here on out, he will be known as Israel. Then Jacob asked, saying, tell me your name, I pray. And God said, why is it that you ask me my name? And he blessed him there. God didn't answer. God didn't answer that specific question. Why? Because Jacob knows. Jacob knows who he's wrestling with in this moment. But it still does require an element of faith. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. See, you see, he knew who it was. Just as he crossed over Penuel, the sun rose on him. Peniel and Penuel, same name. And he limped on his hip. So now that staff that he had will ever be by his side, because he will forever walk with his hip. The rest of his days, which is another 40 years or so, actually another 80 years or so, would be marked with a physical reminder of this night. And every morning as he rose out of bed, he'd have to reach for that staff and be reminded of what happened in this night. Sometimes a physical reminder is a good thing. All right, last verse. Therefore to this day the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shrank, which is in the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the muscle that shrank. And so the tradition carried on as Moses is recalling all of this and writing Genesis. He's saying, to this day we don't eat the meat of the hip socket. It became a tradition for the nation of Israel, created to tell the story and to help Israel remember what it was that happened in these days. Though we may struggle with God, just to kind of sum it all up, He will bring us to the place of being emptied so that He can fill us. And that's what the sanctification process is. That's what we are walking